Okay, good morning to all of you. So this is the last lecture of your program, and I think you people are too tired hearing lot of lectures till now. So I will try to finish as early as possible. So today's topic that I choose based obviously, as I told on the first day, that everything is under the same umbrella. So this is also a continuation. So last day we talked about photolithography that mostly deal with micron, or you can say submicron pattern size, circuit design, and so today the approach is mostly for the nanostructure fabrication or nano device fabrication, and based on electron and ion beam lithography. Now this lithography, or basically both ion beam and electron beam lithography, use charged particles. Both electron and ion are charged particles. So based on that, we can classify the two as electron beam lithography and ion beam lithography. Now, electron beam lithography technique basically uses focus beam of electron, which can be made to scan over a surface and write the desired pattern by interacting with the material. Now, this technique make a tremendous progress for the last, you can say, 40 or years and so, mainly when the field of nanotechnology starts to expand. However, the use of electron, or you can say the use of electron beam in the field of material science and device started in early 60s. Okay, so that time electron was used to deposit hydrocarbon and silicon from the gas phase. In 1966, IBM uh, actually developed a lithography instrument which comprises an electron column whose resolution was submicron. It has a XY motorized stage, a deflection system which was digitized, so that you can write the pattern using the electron beam, and obviously you can again in situ monitor the progress by the secondary electron imaging. So what is the benefit of electron beam lithography over the optical one? The main advantage of electron beam lithography is that you are using accelerated electron beam. That means your electron which is ejected from the source gets accelerated by some accelerating voltage. Now we know from the given formula that if you have a you can say accelerating voltage of V, then the wavelength of the electrons comes out to be of the relation based on 1.226 by root over V when it is in the nanometer range. Now, if we take 30 kilovolt of accelerating voltage, then the wavelength comes out nearly to be 0.007 nanometer. Obviously, if you can increase the accelerating voltage, this will also decrease. That means the wavelength will also decrease. Now, this has a beneficial aspect from the resolution point of view, and also since it is so small that the diffraction problem which occurs in the optical lithography doesn't play a role in this case. So obviously that helps you in decrease the feature size. So if we compare with the photolithography, the advantage of EBL is that you can directly write. Okay, so you can directly write a pattern over your substrate without any mask. So you don't need a mask for that. You can easily make complex pattern with that. Obviously, as far as the resolution is concerned, you can go around 20 nanometer, where we have seen the more or less the least structure that we can make from the optical lithography is around 50 nanometer. And another advantage is that in EBL writing, you can also do an in situ imaging, because you can use this electron beam as it produces secondary electrons, and that secondary electron can image your structure. So that's really the advantages. However, obviously, everything has some disadvantage also. Main disadvantage of this is it is a slow process. Though recently multiple beams are used to overlay, but again, it needs a vacuum system. Your photolithography doesn't need a good vacuum system. You can just do it in open air. Only thing you need a good clean room. That's all. But this has to be a very good vacuum system, because your electron path has to be in the ultra high vacuum. Otherwise, there will be a lot of scattering. So that makes the system expensive. There is a proximity effect also, and that's why the pitch, that means the distance between two pattern, should not be less than 50 nanometers. So that's another problem it faces. And sometimes it faces the difficulty of lift-off when you are using the negative resist. So compared to photolithography, obviously that has lot of advantage, mainly in the resolution part, also in making complex pattern. But being a slow process and being an expensive one, still photolithography dominates the, you can say, the device industry. Whereas EBL dominates mostly whenever you are going for a nano device structure, or you can say some other nanostructure fabrication part. So mainly this has an most important application in nanostructure part, not in the larger device structures, or you can say micro device structure. Now, all of you must be knowing about the ACM. ACM is secondary electron microscope. And many of you must have used that also in your research time. Now, EBL actually has the tool just similar to that an ACM has, because more or less an ACM and an EBL is having the same features. Only an extra feature that EBL has to have is a beam blanker. Otherwise, typically the two systems look similar in, if you see, it's all the tools that it is made up of. Now, the beam spot or the diameter of the beam that you can achieve using 20 keV is around 2 nanometer. Now, if you increase this keV, that will also be reduced. And the typical resolution that you can achieve is around 20 nanometer or so, around 20 nanometer. Now, the steps obviously is more or less the same as you have seen in photolithography. Only thing here in the exposure part, you are exposing this with an electron beam and you don't need a mask for that. Then that's why this is called a direct writing system. The standard EBL resist that mostly popular is PMMA, and that is polymethyl methacrylate. So that is having a very good resolution and good contrast, and it is mainly dissolved in chlorobenzene, or you can dissolve it in anisole. And the common developer that are used for PMMA is MIBK, and that is basically a positive photoresist. You also have negative photoresist, and common negative photoresist used are HSQ, and for that TMAH is the developer. Okay, so if we look at the steps, various steps, as you can see, it is more or less the same as I have shown earlier. Only thing, there is an e-beam writing where the beam actually scan over your sample and it directly react with the resist, and accordingly it does the patterning. Now, if you go to the schematic of a system, lithography system, you can see that it's more or less the same as an ACM looks like. So you have an electron source, you have to have an anode, obviously, then accelerating voltage, you have to have focusing and scanning coils, then obviously a secondary electron detector, sample stage, and so on. Only extra thing that you are having here is the beam blanking. Apart from that, the rest is same. So the electron source has to pass through some optics. Here the lens are magnetic, or you can say electromagnetic lens, because obviously electron can be deflected or get focused whenever it passes through a magnetic or an electrostatic field. So that's why in this case the type of lens that are used in electron beam system are all magnetic or electromagnetic lens. So both condenser lens, CAN coils, all are mostly magnetic or electromagnetic type. Okay, now there can be SEM converted system or dedicated system. In both the cases, the resolution remains the same. Only thing you can say, the accelerating voltage for SEM is limited to 30 kV, whereas for a dedicated system, you can go up to 100 kV. And obviously, whenever you go for 100 kV, then you get a bit better resolution. However, the proximity effect is there in both the cases, so that also limits the situation. However, for the stability, your dedicated system is slightly better. Otherwise, any SCM system can be converted to a e-beam lithography system just by installing a beam blanker and a software, a CAD designer, and that's all. So how small you can get? You can see that a 10 nanometer was achieved. Okay, but that's very rare. And in these cases also, your thickness of the resist has to be very low. Otherwise, you cannot achieve such nanometer range, or you can say sub 10 nanometer or sub 20 nanometer range patterns. For that, your resist thickness has to be too low. Now that also is not possible in most of the cases. So we can say safely you can make patterns of around 50 to 100 nanometer in most of the cases for your applications. Now, if you have to go for 20, 30 nanometer, then you have to keep in mind that resist thickness should not be much. Okay, so as far as the electron source, we all know that electrons are emitted from mostly from the tungsten filament by thermionic emission. Also, better source are now there, which are called field emission sources, which can basically tunnel through the barrier by application of the strong electric field. Now, this is basically the structure how a electron gun looks like, and the left bottom corner shows a tip, the tungsten tip, and this is the gun. The bottom right corner shows the picture of a gun. Now, regarding the electron optics, I have told that mostly they are magnetic or electromagnetic lens type, and that uses the concept that moving charge gets deflected by magnetic field or electromagnetic field. So compared to an optical lithography, here you have to use an electromagnetic lens instead of a normal quartz or glass lens. So I will skip. There are apertures, there are beam deflector. However, this beam deflection is an important part because that actually will help you in writing, because you have to write, you have to scan over your sample for writing the patterns. So beam deflection is an important part. Beam blanker is an extra thing that you have to add. Even if you have an SEM, you have to add this on. And you can see that how a beam blanker works here. That means you just deflect, actually this deflection of the beam from the axis of the aperture to an opaque region has to be very fast. So the response time of a beam blanker has to be very fast, otherwise you cannot get a good pattern in EBL. So that is a very important part of a beam blanker. Now here also the stage part, uh, you can have a motorized stage, but again, if you have a motorized stage, then the pitch, or you can say pitch means the distance between two patterns, has to be large enough, because you cannot move the stage at that level in the nanometer scale. So for that, piezo stage will be a better option. And another thing is that how much you have moved, that also has to be calculated very accurately, and for that laser stage technology are used, basically by the using the concept of interferometry. That calibration has to be done using interferometry, and then you can move the stage using the feedback from the interferometer and have a precise control over it. So you can have both X, Y, and Z control by using this laser interferometer. Okay. Now comes the parameters, because obviously whenever you are doing some lithography, you are working with the beam. Now, some of the parameters that you can play with is mostly the spot size. So if you have to go for a very smaller dimension, obviously that you have to go for the minimum spot size. Otherwise, you cannot achieve that. Another is there is a dose. Now, what is the exposure dose? It is the incoming electron that are needed to fully develop the resist. So that also you have to calibrate first. That means you know your resist thickness. Now, how much dose or how many number of electron is required to fully develop that portion of the resist, that you have to calibrate first. Now, this can be done depending upon the shape of your scanning. That means whether it will be an area dose or line dose or dot dose or point dose, that you have to select. Let's say your structure is not very small enough, then you can go for area dose. That means there the pixel will be selected by an area. Whereas for a line dose, your pixel will be selected by a line. That means your spot will move in a line for a particular pixel. Whereas dot dose will be the minimum, you can say, the dimension that you can achieve with the dot dose. But again, the problem is that obviously if you use line dose or a dot dose for a larger dimension, that will take huge number of time. Because if you see the formula, area dose is the beam current into the dwell time by area. Okay. So its unit is microampere second per centimeter square. Now, if your area size is large enough, then obviously T will increase. Now, if you go for a line dose, what will happen? You will first uh, use a line for a whole area. Let's say you have a area which you want to make a pattern which is nearly 500 nanometer. Now, your line will be only, let's say, depending upon spot size, it will be around 3 nanometer or so. Now, obviously, you can understand how long it will take to scan an area for 500 or 300 nanometer by 300 nanometers or so. So that will take huge time, and obviously dot will take enormous time. So you have to think of that, because it is not only resolution point, you have to consider the time you are spending on the system. So another parameter that you can play is the beam step. Okay, so effectively the pixel size, you can say, will govern the beam step. If there is a formula you can choose for the beam step, but use the beam step when the calculating dose has to be delivered to 1 pixel. Let's say the number of electron in a pixel equal to, you can say, current into time. That means you have to choose one current, and because your spot size will be governed by the current you are having, and you are giving some time for that to scan that region, whether it is a area dose or a dot dose or a line dose, whatever it is, you have to give some time for scanning it or exposing that region. So current into time is basically the number of electron in the pixel, and that is also equal to dose into area. If it is a area, area means area of the pattern you are considering. So in other word, you can say current by frequency, because time can be written as 1 by frequency. So current by frequency equal to dose into beam step square. So area of the region equal to beam step into, or square of the beam step. So thus you can say that current by frequency equal to dose into beam step square. So in this manner, you can play with all the things. That means you can play with the spot size by choosing the appropriate current. You can choose the appropriate dose and also the beam step. So all these things will give rise to a time. So whenever you make a program in your EBL system, you have to choose a beam current, you have to choose a beam dose, and then also you have to choose a beam step. And ultimately what you get, which using this equation actually gives rise to a time. And during the time, the whole EBL writing will be done. Okay, so obviously as more and more the pattern size is, more the time will be. So it is always better, if your size is more, use area dose with a higher dose value. uh, Also choose a larger spot size. Now obviously if you want to make maybe sub 50 nanometer, then you cannot go for an area dose. It's better to go for a line dose and choose the lowest spot size. So all these things you have to consider in mind whenever you are making the program. Okay, while scanning, obviously as you know that electron beam has to ultimately scan over the resist. Now there can be two way of scanning. Either it can be a raster scan or it can be a vector scan. Now what do you mean by a raster scan? In raster scan, the e-beam will only scan in one direction. Let's say it scan in the x direction, then it will scan in the x direction only. And then there will be beam blanking, and the stage will move again perpendicular, and again the e-beam will scan again in the x direction. So it will scan first, there will be a beam blanking, the wafer will move or the sample will move mechanically or translated, then again there will be another scanning in the same direction. So this is called raster scan. Wherever vector scan is different from this, here the beam will simultaneously scan in both x and y direction. And after scanning a small region in x and y direction, then the beam blanking will occur, then the stage will move or the sample will move, and again such scan will occur in the nearest portion. Now you cannot have a scan in both x or y direction for a larger area, because your beam deflector has a limit. It cannot deflect your electron beam for severals of nanometer range or maybe a micron range. That is not possible. So whatever you have to do, you have to have a first choose a area for doing this region, and then you can shift to a neighboring region, as I have shown in my last lecture, where you can do a step and repeat. So that step and repeat program is also applicable for this e-beam system also, where you are trying to make a larger area pattern, and that is called stitching. That means you are doing first a patterning in a certain area, then shift to the other region, again do the patterning, and there has to be a synchronous. That means there should not be any mismatch between the two. So this is called a good stitching between the two patterns. Otherwise what will happen, whenever you develop the whole wafer, you will see there is a discontinuity in the pattern, so that should not be there. So this is the same as the raster scan, what I have told, that you scan the beam in a horizontal direction. First you scan the beam in the horizontal direction, there is a beam blanking, then the wafer has moved, so now the beam is falling on the next line, and again it scans on the right or maybe left, and then again there is a beam blanking, and again the wafer has moved, it has moved to the next line, and so on. So these things will happen, and the step size is this one. So each of the circle actually is a beam spot, and the distance between the two center of the spot actually tells you about the beam step. Now you can do an overlapping steps also, and it is also recommendable. That means here the figure shows that one spot has started just after the other, but we recommend for a bit of overlapping so that no region remains, you can say, unaffected. So it is always better to have some overlapping of the beams. Okay. Now regarding the resolution, let's say you have a 2 nanometer beam spot. Now, will you get 2 nanometer line using that beam spot, whether you are using point dose or a line dose, whatever? No, the answer is no. If you have a 2 nanometer beam spot, you cannot achieve 2 nanometer line. But what's the reason? It will write it. Let's say we have a diamond pen, we scratch it over a glass or a silicon substrate. What happens? Mostly the tip will determine what will be the dimension of the line or the width of the line. Then that should also happen in this case also. But the problem is that whenever an electron beam is falling or interacting with the resist, it will also create secondary electrons. Now these secondary electron will have a lateral diffusion, and that will cause some of the resist in the neighboring region also get affected. Now if you see these two Monte Carlo simulated images, the left hand one shows the interaction or the diffusion of the secondary electrons when the electron beam of 10 kV falls on a PMMA coated silicon substrate. You can see approximately there is some diffusion of the secondary electrons on both sides. Obviously that will happen. So whether your spot size is only 2 nanometer, still there will be interaction of the resist with the secondary electron on the sides. If you increase it to 20 kV or 30 kV, whatever, you can easily see the diffusion increases. Diffusion of the secondary electron increases, and obviously that will increase your dimension, because the neighboring
पहले पूछ रही है अभी चिकन खाने की मत
so you may maximum achieve 12 nanometer, or least you can achieve is the 12 nanometer line using 2 nanometer e-beam. So that is the what I have told earlier also. In case of the disadvantage part, this formation of the secondary electron due to the interaction of your electron beam with the resist or anything else actually cause the main problem, and which limits the resolution of EBL system up to 10 to 15 nanometer. You cannot go below that. So here are the various patterns that has been formed by electron beam lithography. You can see you have different shapes, different structures of dimension in the nanometer or submicron level. Myself has used EBL rigorously, and I have used mix and match technology. What do you mean by mix and match technology? That means mostly my application was for making probes on single nanowires. Now, these probes were made on single nanowire by e-beam lithography, whereas you have to measure that. We are measuring photocurrent or maybe the normal electrical transport. Now, again, you have to use some device which may be a lock-in amplifier, which may be a source meter, and so. And you have to have probes connected. Now, you cannot connect a probe on a very thin line or a very small pad. So your pad has to be a larger one that we have made by photolithography. So you can see this pad on the first image on the left hand corner of 7 millimeter by 7 millimeter is the silicon size we take. Then we make a photolithography pattern. Now if I zoom it, this is the middle portion. We keep a region which is vacant. And you can see some of the cross which are mostly used for the alignment mark. Now what we do after we make the photolithography, we deposit gold and do lift off, and ultimately what we get is like this. So this contrast actually showing gold on silicon or maybe silicon dioxide, and having these cross marks. Now we make some nanowires. Whatever nanowire we make, we dissolve this nanowire in a liquid, then drop cast the nanowires over this. So nanowire will fall irregularly on all the regions. Obviously you have to control, you can say you have to control the density of the nanowire in the liquid. So if it is too dense, it will be difficult to find out a single individual nanowire. Again, if you make it too dilute, again you may have no nanowire in this central portion. So you have to play with that. So it should be an optimum density of the nanowire in the solution. Okay, so let's say you have the nanowire somewhere in between this region. Now you have the photolithographically developed gold pads now, but still they are not connected. So now we use electron beam lithography to connect that, because since these are nanowire, so maybe the gold pads that we have made with photolithography will be too large to connect those. So maybe a single pad will cover the whole nanowire. So that is not possible to do with the photolithography. So we do this or achieve this with e-beam lithography. Actually, we first locate the nanowire using the secondary electron imaging system, then find out its position compared to the alignment marks like the cross. We calculate the distance of the nanowire from this marker, make such a program, and then we again do a e-beam writing. Now while e-beam writing, we keep in mind that initially from the pad we should progress a bit, and then in a second step of writing we will ultimately connect it. So you can see initially from the larger pad we make a pad which is near to the nanowire, and then make a thinner writing just over the pad. So it will be a two-step process, and then we connect those. So here are some of the result. We have made lot of silicon nanowires. We connect them, we make transport property, then photoelectric detection of these single nanowires. We also have done with the germanium nanowires. You can see these are 2 probe then 4 probe connection, all done on a single nanowire. So all these images, you can see only the electron beam lithographically connected region, because these are the SEM image of those. So these were actually connected to the larger pads which were made by photolithography. That is not in this picture. So only the connections you can see on the single nanowire. One is, let's say, 220 nanometer, 100 nanometer, one in 50 nanometer. There are also 60 nanometer gold nanowire and so on. So we are making connections both 2 probe or 4 probe, whatever we desire. So all these things are possible only because of the electron beam lithography. So now we also have make arrays of germanium nanowire using this e-beam lithography, and you can see all parallel lines can be easily drawn using this e-beam lithography. You can in this case the thickness of the wires are 75 nanometer. However, the line width of these are in the 500 nanometer range. However, if you wish, you can make 100 nanometer also. It is possible to do 100 nanometer or below. Below is a bit difficult, but 100 nanometer you can easily achieve using this. If you work hard, then obviously you can do 50 nanometer lines also using this one, and then do a lift up. But again, for that case, the thickness of the wires, that means here it is 75 nanometer. For those, it cannot be possible to have such a thickness. Then you have to go down to maybe 10 to 15 nanometer thickness if you have to achieve a line width of 50 nanometer or so. So I quickly go to the ion beam lithography. So that is another charged particle that are used in electron beam. You are using focused electron. Here you are using focused ion beam. So you are using a pencil of ion, or you can say a beam of ion accelerated with energy and scanned over the target. Now again there is a difference here. Obviously this doesn't need a mask, but this also does not need a resist, because this beam, obviously ions are much heavier compared to the electron, and that's why whenever it is falling on some material, it is falling with a high momentum, and that's make it as a machining tool. So you can directly etch out material from that, or it also has a facility where you can directly deposit also. So it can be used as a nano deposition system and also as a nano machining system. So no additional steps are required, which is required in case of a e-beam lithography or photolithography, like resist coating, developing, and so on. So you can remove these steps, you can avoid these steps. You don't need those steps actually for this type of system. So FIB is also similar to SEM. Only thing, you need to have an ion source instead of an electron source. And in most of the labs, these are having both the sources. That means electron source and ion sources, and all these are called dual beam system because of the dual sources. And I myself have also used the dual beam system, and that this actually helps you to do in situ imaging. That means while it is doing some machining with the ion source, at the same time you can do an imaging with the electron source. So that's the main facility of using the dual beam system. Now this is also obviously like electron beam lithography. It is a direct write technique, so no mask is required. You can also expose the resist like EBL. Obviously, it is not that you cannot have a resist and you cannot expose it with the ion beam, but the problem it has a low penetration depth. So it cannot penetrate much in case of a resist. Because of its high momentum, what will happen, it will get scattered initially. And also it will damage easily. It will scatter and it will damage easily. So it is difficult to have a good patterns transfer by using resist. Though its resolution is much better than the e-beam lithography, because secondary electron that it creates has lower energy, so the diffusion is less compared to an electron beam lithography. So proximity effect will be low. But again, that some problem obviously is there, because it is digging out material. Let's say you have a silicon and you are actually cutting or you are machining it with ion beam. What will happen, whenever it is digging the material, some of the material may get redeposited around it. So there may create a hump at the boundary. So that type of problem may occur. So very good expert in doing this type can avoid this redeposition. Otherwise, if you do go for a highly deep, you can say machining, then redeposition problem will be more. But otherwise, this is a, you can say, a versatile tool, because you can do an etching, it can do the lithography by doing etching or something else, even using resist coating. It can do a deposition directly on the substrate. Also it can also do imaging, but again this is a very expensive system and it's a slow system, and more complicated than the EBL system. So obviously everything has some pros and cons. And if you see a dual beam system, you have a electron column, you have an ion column, but obviously there has to be have an angle between the two, because of technical thing. The angle normally that is made between the two columns are around 52 degree or maybe 54 degree, and so so that this is made such that you can do an imaging and ion milling at the same time. So you can see on the right hand picture, the sample is tilted such that the ion column is falling perpendicular to the substrate or the sample, whereas the image is taken by the electron column, which is interacting at an angle with the substrate. So you can have a tilted view. So while you are doing the cutting or deposition, whatever, using the ion beam, you will get a tilted view in the SEM system. So that correction you can do. That means you can do a correction in situ and take a top view also, or sometimes if you want to have a cross-sectional view, then this will have a benefit. So as you can see that ion beam is falling on a sample electron beam. Actually, in the dual beam system, electron column will be on the top, ion column will be placed at an angle in the system. Also, for such type of system, you can have a manipulator, and also you can have a gas injection system. Now, it is not necessarily that you have to have these two, but most of the dual beam system have this gas injection system actually gives you the advantage of depositing in situ, and manipulator is mainly for manipulating some of the samples. That means to remove one portion of from the sample which you cut to keep it on the other side. So this is the main thing. I will not go into details of this. This is just the instrumentation part, same as the electron beam. Only there is an ion generation and so. Now coming to the source, there are a lot of ion source that can be used, but the most popular that are used are the gallium. So gallium ions are mostly used in the focus ion beam system. Now, keeping so many things in mind, why gallium was used or why galliums are so popular. Now, the main thing is that it has a room temperature, it is a room temperature liquid, and its melting point is 30 degrees. So that is very important because this source actually acts by using liquid metals, and that's why the name liquid metal ion system or LMIS. Normally whenever you have a source in FIB, if you want to purchase it, you will say I need a gallium LMIS, or you may say argon LMIS or helium LMIS and so on. Now, in most of the system, gallium has shown the best way to use as an LMIS because of its melting point to be around 30 degrees. Also, its steam pressure is also low. Now, you have to work in a very high vacuum part. So, your system has to be working in a high vacuum. So, if its steam pressure is high, then your high vacuum will degrade or vacuum will degrade. So, you have to choose the gallium keeping in mind that it has a low steam pressure. So low melting point, which is around room temperature, low steam pressure, and then narrow energy distribution. So all these things make gallium to be the most popular as the ion source. So this is how LMIS looks like. You have the tungsten filament, you have a gallium reservoir uh, over it. Now what will happen, you have a small heating coil around it, around the gallium reservoir. Now if you apply a small heat around this heater, then the gallium liquid will flow and wet the tungsten needle. And when there is an, you can say, a high electric field applied at the extractor electrode, a Taylor cone will occur. I hope you people know what is a Taylor cone, and the Taylor cone will occur, and that Taylor cone will make, though the tungsten tip is wide enough, the Taylor cone tip will be of around 2 to 5 nanometer. So this concept is used in ion beam source, even in electron beam source also. Nowadays you are having FESEM, which is called field emission source, where actually it have a tunneling thing. There also you have the tungsten coil coated with a material, and whenever it is heated, that material gets in a molten stage, and then due to the high electric field, that takes a Taylor cone shape, and the Taylor cone has a very sharp edge, and the tip of the Taylor cone is around 2 to 5 nanometer. So approximately that decreases the beam spot. So this is how the Taylor cone is made and how the LMIS works. Now, if you go to the history of the development, first LMIS was produced in 75 by Kron and Ringo. And in the same year, Levi-Setti and Orioff use, you can say, GFIS based FIB. Okay, so it is basically gas field ionization source. So both LMIS and GFIS based FIB was built in 1975. Sources were made in 1975, and in 1978, first FIB based on LMIS by Seliger was developed. Now in 1980s, FIB was started used in semiconductor industry, mainly not for making any pattern, but mainly for mask repair and IC editing. Now, none industry use FIB for making any circuit design. It is not possible for use FIB, such a costly instrument and such a slow instrument, to use a huge circuit design or a huge circuit in a full wafer. It will be immaterial or impractical to do so. Most of the time, FIB are used for repairing part and doing some small area corrections in your circuit. Let's say you make some circuit using your normal photolithography or even e-beam lithography, and after whole process, you found some defect somewhere. That can be adjusted using your FIB. So that is mainly used for. Also, you can use, you make a mask and that needs some repairment, so that can be done using this ion beam. Okay. Now, as I have told, there are three main process or operation that can be done with ion beam. One is basically the milling or the etching. Also, one is deposition, and another is just imaging. Now, imaging has to be done with very low current. Otherwise, if you use high current for imaging, it will sputter out the material. So instead of having the image of the material, you will see suddenly your material has gone from your substrate. Okay. You have to use a bit high ion current for the ion milling part. And you can do deposition, which is normally done by chemical interaction with a gas assisted one. That means you have to insert a gas, and then by using the ion beam assisted system, you can do some deposition. So three basic operations that can be done using this ion beam system. Now, as far as the ion milling is concerned, that is mostly used, and you can make varieties of pattern doing this in the three-dimensional aspect. And this works mostly as the concept of sputtering. That means when ion is falling with high momentum on your sample, it basically sputters out some of the material where it is imparting its momentum. So there will be a momentum transfer due to collision, and it will actually sputter out the material. So this is the way how it works in case of ion milling. Oh, you can see here it is actually, I have done some type of ion milling in various applications. Here you can see a nanowire has been made. This nanowire was around, I think, below 100 nanometer. This nanowire was made below of a width of below 100 nanometer using the ion milling. Actually, we have actually deposited a film over the silicon, or basically a silicon oxide coated silicon, and then starts milling it. You can see the milling has been done, and only a thin strip of the film exists in a line, which is below 100 nanometer. I have made some of the circular array of holes formed by milling on copper film. Then different shapes have been made also, circular, squarish, triangular, diamond type of shape on permalloy. So all these works have been done for some magnetic applications. And also we have done some TM sample preparation, which can be also done using this FIB system. So FIB are also used for TM sample preparation for solid samples. Not obviously it is not required for the powder samples, but those who work for the solid sample, FIB is a very, you can say, useful tool for TM sample preparation. So I can show you one video which I have taken during one of the milling, where I have milled basically a ware using the milling. So you can see the milling has started on the left hand side, and the image is taken during that time. So ACM is taking the image in the dual beam system, and ion beam is doing the milling part. Now it is starting to etch out the right hand part. Now you can do a coarse milling, and then you can do a fine milling. So initially you should do a coarse milling, and then you can decrease the width by do a fine milling. So it can be possible to do. So this is how a nanowire can be made. And you can make a bit longer also, but that will cause lot of you can say ion source. You will basically consume lot of ion source, and that will take a lot of time also. So normally no one used to make longer wires using focus ion beam. Also you can have a complicated structures also. These are not made by myself. You can have micro gears, micro cantilever I have made, but not the gear part. You can also make AFM tips. You can see AFM tips were made also using the iron milling. So gear, cantilever, AFM tips, and lot of structures can be made based on your requirement, and that can be done using an expertise you have to achieve, and with a better resolution compared to the others. And most important, you can do three-dimensional structures using this. Okay, but however, everything has have a drawback. This also has some drawback. While it mills, these ions interact with the surrounding, and that causes amorphization on the side regions. So whenever you are milling, you have to know that you are actually consume some of the crystalline regions. So let's say you have a crystalline sample and you are doing milling of the sample from both the sides. And what will happen if you use 30 kV, so around approximately 30 nanometer of the sample will be consumed on amorphization. So if you want to achieve 50 nanometer line and you start with 30 kV, then what will happen whenever you are cutting from both the sides, whole region will get amorphized. So that's why it is preferable to use very low kV to cut if you want to achieve a nanowire or maybe a structure whose dimension is too low. So otherwise its crystalline property will totally vanish. And if it is an amorphous sample by itself, then it's not a problem. However, also since ion interacts with the sample, there will be other defects like vacancies and interstitial defects will also form. Like one main problem will be ion implantation of gallium. That means when gallium is interacting with the sample, some of the gallium ions may get implanted, and obviously will get implanted if you are using high dose, that means high kV. And also I have told that redeposition of the sputtered material is a problem. Like you can see, if one is not an expert in doing milling, the redeposition has occurred in the same well where you are actually digging out. You are digging out a well and the same material has get redeposited in that well. So obviously that's of no use. It can have a halo effect due to the beam tail, because mostly these beams are Gaussian. So this tail will have a halo effect on the sides, and because you have a high momentum ions falling on your sample, that cause a local heating. So if your sample is a bit you can say unstable in temperature, at high temperature, that may also cause a problem. So these are the main drawback in iron milling part. Now, as I have told that apart from the milling, you have a gas injection system where you can do deposition, which help you in deposition. So you have to have a gas injection system apart from the iron column, and that I have showed earlier in a schematic, that you can have a OmniProbe, you can have a GIS system or a gas injection system. So what the gas injection system does, it actually uh, incorporates some gaseous material inside your chamber near to the sample surface. So what happens, whatever precursor gas you want to use, you will insert the injection system which will have a nozzle just near to your sample region, and then open the valve. The gaseous precursor will now cover the region above your surface. Now you scan the sample with your gallium ion. Now when it scans, these ions will interact with your gaseous substance. Also, not only the primary ions, whenever the ions are working or interacting with your sample, it will create secondary electron and also secondary ions. Actually, these, instead of primary, it has been seen that the secondary ions and secondary electrons play the important role. They actually interact with the species or the adsorbed gas molecules on the substrate. They cause a dissociation of the gas molecule by these secondary ions or secondary electrons, and then some of the dissociated material gets removed, and rest of the material get deposited on the surface of the material according to the scanning. So let's say you want to scan a small region, that scanning will create secondary ions and secondary electrons around that secondary ions and secondary electron will dissociate the gas molecules. The volatile species will move away or will remove by the vacuum system, while the heavier metal ions or metal atoms basically will get deposited according to the pattern you want to draw. So this is how you can deposit some material. Mostly metals can be deposited. Sometimes uh, oxide or insulating materials are also deposited by this process. So this is the same schematic. The very common thing that are deposited using this system is platinum, and the source that are used is trimethyl platinum. It is not a pure platinum. Obviously pure platinum is not a gaseous system in room temperature. So if you make it a gaseous platinum, then you have to go for a very high temperature, and that is not technically possible in such type of vacuum system. So you have to go for some metallo-organic compounds, which can be easily vaporized and can be inserted on the sample. Though it is solid at room temperature, but at 38 to 40 degree, it can be gaseous or vapor of that material can be formed, and this is very chemically resistive and very hard to get deposited. You can see a platinum has been deposited by this GIS and FIB over this one, over the sample. Also, tungsten is a very common material which are also deposited, but platinum has some advantage. However, tungsten has a lower resistivity than platinum, and obviously in case of circuit editing, this tungsten is mostly used instead of platinum, but it has a slower deposition rate and its operating temperature is slightly higher than in case of a platinum. Like insulator, you can deposit silicon dioxide over, or you can actually do oxidation over silicon using this. Here the source material will be TOS, which is liquid in liquid form at room temperature, and that is inserted inside the sample using nozzle when mixed with water vapor. And you can coat the silicon surface with that oxide uh, at a rate of 1 micron per 20 minutes. So its rate is not very bad. You can do that in if you want to do a selective area oxidation. So that is a beneficial thing. Okay. I myself has used platinum for making some connection. Actually, you can say the why not tungsten. Actually, the facility that we have is having a platinum source in our GIS system. That's why we have used platinum. We could have used tungsten also if we have the source. Now, as you have seen, the source of platinum is an organometallic thing. So whenever you are depositing these connections or the leads, you have to keep in mind that these are not pure platinum. Okay, what you are actually depositing is basically a, you can say, a mixture of carbon platinum. Okay, so mostly what you deposit is a mixture of carbon and platinum, and with carbon percentage more. So that is a main disadvantage, that if you think that you are actually depositing a pure platinum, it's a no. It's actually a combination or a composite of carbon and platinum, where carbon is an amorphous and platinum actually is a crystalline platinum in a amorphous carbon matrix. However, in this type of application, it will not be a problem because you are just depositing for a small portion. You are not making these leads for long. You actually have deposited gold or maybe platinum using photolithography, and then you have make the electron beam lithography contacts, but maybe due to some lithography problem you have afterwards checked that your main connection doesn't make contact on the nanowire. That means you have tried to make e-beam lithography contact over your nanowire, but suddenly you check after doing all the process that okay, there is some defect during that process and nanowire is not properly connected. What will you do? Using the FIB platinum, you can do the rest of the connection. So as I have told, normally this technique is done for repairing port purpose, and that can be done like this. So then for that case, for the repairing case, it will not be a huge problem. Okay. Again, if you want to make some irregular shape three-dimensional structures, then e-beam litho, photolitho will not work. You can easily do such type of, not easily, but you can do actually such type of three-dimensional structures of different shapes, like spring has been made, some insect-like of structure, antenna type of structures can be made using this type of GIS deposition. So that can be made. If you have a good expertise, you can make those. And if you can see that the shape of a human being has been made where the legs are of width of 200 nanometer. So that is possible. So these things are possible. Obviously, one should not make a human being structure using this. This is just for a show. But for different requirement, you can make a motor-like structure, a coil-like structure, a spring-like structure using this. you can actually deposit platinum using electron source also, because as I have told you that the gas is actually interacting with the secondary ions and secondary electrons, and the dissociation occurs because of this interaction. Now, secondary electron not only generates because of the ion beam, it can be generated by the electron beam also. So if you have a GIS and only an electron source, you can do some deposition, but the deposition in that case will be very slow. And that's why normally we prefer ion beam if we want to deposit a thick metal like platinum or tungsten, whatever. If the thickness of the material has to be more, then ion beam is preferred. Otherwise, you can apply electron beam induced deposition, because it has an advantage that no gallium contamination will be there. Okay, as I have told that whenever you are using ion beam for your lithography purpose, some ions will be implanted. That means always if you take an EDAX after doing some ion deposition or ion milling, you will find some gallium in the EDAX data. That is because of the gallium contamination due to implantation. Also, ion beam do some damage to the substrate because it is doing some sputtering at the same time. That damage will not occur if you do electron beam induced deposition. So there are some obviously advantage of electron beam gaseous deposition also, apart from the ion beam deposition. However, dissociation of carbon from the metal takes place in case of ion beam deposition more, and that's why the percentage of platinum will be more if you do ion beam deposition compared to the electron beam deposition. We have found that more or less 30 to 40% platinum and rest carbon is achieved if you do a platinum deposition using focus ion beam. Whereas we have also done electron beam induced deposition of the same platinum, and after doing EDAX we found that the percentage of platinum is only 15% and the rest is carbon. However, in case on ion beam we are getting gallium percentage of 2 to 3%. However, no gallium was there obviously in case of electron beam deposition. So here also, while doing deposition, you have to play with some of the parameters like beam current, scan area, scan speed, and so on. And you have a preferred current, which is around 2 to 6 picoampere per micrometer square, which you should use mainly for making medium sized patterns. If you have to go for smaller pattern, you can increase the current a bit, maybe up to 10 picoampere, but not much more than that. Otherwise, it will start milling, because while doing this it also mills. So if the current is high, milling will be dominant compared to the deposition. Here also, as I have told, that the main application can be connecting some of the wires using this platinum deposition. You can do bonding of the TM sample while you are lifting the TM sample using Omniprobe or the manipulator. It can be used for electrical contacts and surface protection also. And thank you to all for your kind attention, and I now ask you all to have an interaction or ask any question if you want. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Is there any questions? Participants, you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question. And I also share the feedback link on your chat box. Sorry, test link at the chat box. So already Dr. Das, whatever presented, lot of images of the by FIB, focus ion beam lithography, electron beam lithography, all the things. But as I know, I feel I have done some work, so it's very difficult to get such images, such lithography. Don't think that you can get it easily within 1 day or 2 day or in a 1 month you will get it. Am I correct, Dr. Das?
Yeah, actually, you have to play with the system every day for as long as it possible, and maybe you can achieve such type of images after 1 or 2 years if you work every day. Otherwise, as I have shown, there will be lot of problems, lot of defects will be there. You cannot actually take an image also, as Dr. Panda told, that really taking an image is also another problem in this type of system.
Challenging job. You said.
Yeah, really a challenging thing. So you have to know how to do all those things, and that you can do whenever you work hard for that. So actually these things which I achieve, that I achieve after, actually I was there from the beginning of the installation of the system, and then for long 3 to 4 years I have worked with this. So otherwise it is really not possible to achieve this.
So any questions from the participant side?
So all are tired, I think.
Yeah, Anant Raj, you can talk directly. If you have no
Yeah,
issue.
I found a question that whether it is possible to deposit magnetic material. Okay, that's a really good question.
Very good question.
Yeah, really good question. No, actually, it is not only for the deposition. It is very difficult to take an image of magnetic material also. Okay, because you know that you are interacting with an electron source and an ion source. So depositing or even imaging a magnetic material is a challenge. You can image magnetic material, but really that is a challenge. But depositing a magnetic material is not possible using ion beam. Another problem with the deposition is that there are not lot of sources which have a organometallic compounds which can be used in FIB, because you have to have some organometallic compounds which will have gaseous stage at much low temperature. That means maybe 40, 50 or 60 degrees centigrade. Otherwise, if you have a very high temperature thing, you cannot install it in your FIB. So first you have to have a source, so then only you can deposit. So really it is difficult to deposit magnetic materials using ion beam lithography. But okay, what you can do, what I have shown in one of my images, I have used permalloy, then cobalt and nickel films first, and then make the pattern using ion beam, though it is very difficult to do that, because that's a magnetic material, and doing iron milling even in the magnetic material is very difficult. But still we have done that, and we have very good result out of that. We have some simulation and then experimental result using Carr effect, and we have published some of very good papers out of that. Yes, it is possible, but not deposition. We have to deposit the material by thin film deposition first, and then do the processing. So,
Another
Dr.
question is
Raj,
also there.
is it okay?
Yes, sir. So one more question.
Yes. Yes, please.
Yes, please.
What about you know about any material when it goes to nano size, they will change the magnetic property. For example, if you just take any paramagnetic material for.
Can you please a little bit loudly?
Yeah, I cannot hear actually.
It's not audible.
Yeah.
Is it audible, sir?
Yes, yes. Now it is audible.
Yeah. Any materials, if you just take it at nanoscale, so they become peculiar with respect to their magnetic nature.
Yes, yes.
Because when you are reducing to the nanoscale, their magnetic property may be changed. For example, a paramagnetic material will become a magnetic.
Really, really.
Have you faced in such a case?
Yes, obviously. Actually, in our case, we were trying to see how the effect comes whenever we are working with this nanometer regime. That means, okay, most of the properties of the magnetic material in the bulk property is known, but not much work has been done, and how much property changes whenever you are going for a nanostructure of magnetic material is not very well known. So that was really one of our work, that we make nano patterns in the magnetic material and how it changes from the bulk. That means we change basically the size, we change the shape and also the pitch, and that shows really a you can say an improved change in the property of the magnetic material while doing those. And that matches with the simulation also. Our one of our team member was good in simulation part, and she actually have done all the simulation based on the size of the material property. And then our experimental result, which shows some of the changes in the magnetic nature, matches well with the simulated result. Yes, we have seen that.
Thank you, sir.